A widowed executive is approached by a street girl who promises the impossible to make his son speak again. Skeptical, he agrees to the deal and watches stunned as the boy breaks the silence with a single word: sister. This encounter ignites a path of revelations that unravels secrets, exposes betrayals, and reveals a hidden paternity. This beautiful story of resilience and love has interested you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Continuing on, night was falling over Fifth Avenue in New York City as the lights of the skyscrapers began to twinkle against the darkening sky. Robert Miller, 42, an executive at one of the country's largest construction firms, was walking distractedly toward one of the most sophisticated restaurants in the area. His face bore the marks of a man consumed by work and loneliness, since Claire, his wife, had passed away 3 years earlier in an accident on the Long Island Expressway. In recent years, Robert had thrown himself into his work as a way to escape reality. His penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side had become just a place to sleep, while his office at Horizon Construction had transformed into his true home. The only exception in his life was Michael, his 9-year-old son, who hadn't spoken a single word since the tragic event. The best specialists in New York had diagnosed him with selective mutism, a result of the trauma. As he passed a corner near the restaurant, Robert felt a small tug on his coat. Turning around, he saw a girl who looked no older than 10. Her large, expressive eyes contrasted with her dirty face and worn-out clothes. "Mister, can I have your leftovers? I'll make your son talk." The sentence, spoken with surprising conviction, made Robert stop in his tracks. How did this child know about Michael? Was it just a coincidence? Perhaps a wild guess to get some food? "How do you know about my son?" Robert asked, a mix of intrigue and suspicion in his voice. "I saw you two the other day. He doesn't talk, right?" "I know what that's like. But he'll talk to me, I'm sure of it." There was something in the certainty of her statement that disarmed Robert. It wasn't an empty promise, nor was it a rehearsed strategy for begging. There was an urgency and, strangely, a disconcerting sincerity. "And what's your name?" he asked, trying to buy time as he processed the unusual situation. "Victoria," the girl replied, with a shy smile that lit up her face for a brief moment. The name seemed like a cruel irony for someone in such a vulnerable condition. Robert took a better look at the girl. Her curly hair was tangled, but one could see it was a natural reddish-brown. Her cheeks, though covered in grime, still held a childish touch that contrasted with a gaze aged by the harshness of life on the streets. "Are you hungry, Victoria?" The girl nodded without looking away. There was no pleading in her eyes, only dignity, a quality Robert admired in his business partners and never expected to find in a street child. "I'm having dinner at that restaurant over there. If you want to wait for me, I'll bring you the leftovers." Robert pointed to the elegant establishment just a few feet away. "Can I go with you?" The question caught Robert by surprise. The restaurant was one of New York's most exclusive, frequented by business leaders and celebrities. The sight of the girl in that environment would cause, at the very least, discomfort. "That wouldn't be appropriate, Victoria." "I get it," she interrupted with disconcerting maturity. "I'll wait here. But don't forget, okay?" Something in the girl's tone made him hesitate. During his meal, Robert couldn't concentrate. He thought about the child waiting outside, about the absurd promise to make Michael talk, and about the strange coincidence of it all. He asked the waiter to pack up half of his barely touched dinner and hurried outside. To his surprise, Victoria was still there, sitting on the sidewalk, hugging her knees. When she saw him, she stood up quickly. "I thought you weren't coming back," she confessed. "I promised, didn't I?" Robert handed her the container with the dinner. "Now about this business of making my son talk. Can I meet him?" Victoria asked as she opened the box and tried to contain her eagerness at the sight of the food. The most sensible answer would be no. Bringing a stranger, especially a homeless child, to his apartment would be reckless, to say the least. But something inexplicable about this encounter made him consider the unthinkable. "Where do you live, Victoria?" The girl shrugged as she ate. "Around. Do you have a family? Anyone to look after you?" She shook her head, not pausing her meal. "Victoria, I'm going to make you a proposal." Robert couldn't believe what he was about to say. "You can come to my apartment, meet Michael, and take a shower." Tomorrow morning we'll find the right social services for your case." The girl's eyes widened, a mix of hope and suspicion. "You don't have to call anyone. I just want a place to sleep tonight. I'll leave tomorrow." Robert nodded, knowing it was the most responsible thing to do. He called Mrs. Carmen, the housekeeper who looked after Michael during his absences, letting her know he was bringing a guest. The woman, who had worked for the family since before Michael was born, didn't hide her surprise but promised to prepare the guest room. During the ride in Robert's car, Victoria remained silent, watching the city through the window as if seeing a completely different world. The contrast between the New York of illuminated skyscrapers and the New York of sidewalks and underpasses was stark, and this girl seemed to move between these two universes like a curious visitor. Upon arriving at the luxurious condominium on the Upper East Side, Victoria hesitated before entering the elevator. "Do you really live here?" she asked, her eyes scanning the lobby filled with marble and mirrors. "Yes, on the top floor." In the apartment, Mrs. Carmen greeted them with an expression that mixed curiosity and concern. Michael was on the living room sofa, focused on a complex jigsaw puzzle, his favorite pastime since he had stopped speaking. The boy looked up when the door opened, and his gaze immediately met Victoria's. What happened next left Robert and Mrs. Carmen paralyzed. Michael stood up, walked over to Victoria, and after staring at her for a few seconds, uttered a single word: "Sister." The voice, hoarse from disuse, sounded like a stranger's. Mrs. Carmen brought her hands to her mouth, unable to contain her emotion. Robert felt his legs weaken. Victoria, for her part, stood motionless, her eyes fixed on Michael as if she too couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Do you know me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Michael didn't answer. Instead, he took her by the hand and led her to his room. Robert and Mrs. Carmen followed them, witnessing one of the most surreal moments of their lives. In the bedroom, Michael opened a drawer and took out a small toy robot, his most precious object, a gift from his mother before the accident. He held it out to Victoria in a clear gesture of sharing. The girl received the toy with reverent care, as if she understood the value of that moment. "What is happening here?" whispered Mrs. Carmen, voicing the question that echoed in Robert's mind. "I don't know," he answered truthfully. "But I'm going to find out." While Mrs. Carmen prepared a bath for Victoria and found some of Michael's old clothes that might fit her, Robert watched the two interact. There was no dialogue, at least not a verbal one, but there was a silent communication, as if they shared a secret code. "Mister, can I sleep near the window?" asked Victoria when Robert led her to the guest room. "And with the door open?" Robert understood immediately. There were security measures, escape routes in case she felt threatened. "Of course you can." "And my name is Robert." "Robert," she repeated, as if testing the sound. "You seem nice, but I still don't trust you." Her sincerity completely disarmed him. "That's fair, and you should know I'm confused by all this too. But I promise no harm will come to you while you're under my roof." Victoria stared at him for a moment, weighing the truth of his promise. "Okay, but if you try anything, I know how to defend myself." The statement, coming from such a small and seemingly fragile child, broke Robert's heart. What kind of life had she had to develop such mistrust? That night, after making sure the children were asleep, Robert sat in his study and picked up the phone. He called his longtime friend, Dr. Andrew Campbell, one of the most respected geneticists at Mount Sinai Hospital. "Andrew, I need an urgent favor. A DNA test with the utmost discretion." "Robert, are you okay? It's almost 11 at night. Sorry for the late hour, but it's really important. I think I may have found a daughter I never knew existed." The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. "Come to my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring the child." After hanging up, Robert allowed himself a moment of reflection. His mind drifted back 10 years before he met Claire, when he had a relationship with Renee, a young architecture student interning at his company. The romance had been intense but brief. She had disappeared suddenly, leaving only a cryptic letter about following her own path. Robert had never heard from her again. Looking at Claire's photo on his desk, Robert felt a mix of guilt and hope. If Victoria was really his daughter with Renee, it would mean Michael had a sister who, inexplicably, he had recognized at first sight. Fate at times wove plots more complex than any work of fiction. And that night, at an exclusive restaurant on Fifth Avenue had been just the first chapter of a story that promised to completely transform the lives of everyone involved. For the first time in 3 years, Robert felt something other than the emptiness that had dominated his existence, a faint hope that his shattered family could, in some incomprehensible way, begin to rebuild itself. Chapter 2. Truths Revealed. The next morning, Robert woke before sunrise. His mind, filled with questions, hadn't allowed for a peaceful sleep. As he passed through the hallway, he noticed Michael's bedroom door was ajar. He peeked in carefully and saw something he had never imagined: his son and Victoria, sitting on the rug, communicating through drawings. "Good morning," Robert said, cautiously entering the room. Michael looked at his father and, to Robert's surprise, replied, "Good morning, Dad." 2 words, simple, everyday words, but ones he hadn't heard in 3 long years. Robert felt his eyes well up, but he held back. He didn't want to break the fragile moment with excessive emotion. "We were drawing," Victoria explained, showing him a piece of paper with colorful figures. "He drew us with a dog." "But you don't have a dog." "No, we don't," Robert confirmed, looking at the drawing where 3 figures, clearly Robert, Michael, and Victoria, appeared next to a large brown dog. "Would you like to have one, Michael?" The boy nodded, looking hopefully at his father. "We can think about it," Robert replied, feeling a strange sense of normalcy in the conversation, as if Victoria had always been part of their home. Mrs. Carman was already preparing breakfast when the 3 entered the kitchen. The housekeeper couldn't hide her astonishment at seeing Michael communicating, even if with few words. "We're heading out in a little while," Robert informed them. "I have a few appointments today." "Are you taking the children, sir?" Mrs. Carman asked, surprised. "Yes, these are matters that involve them." While they ate breakfast, Robert observed the interaction between Michael and Victoria. There was a disconcerting familiarity, as if they truly shared a bond deeper than the brief encounter the night before. Michael, always so introverted and isolated, seemed to blossom in the girl's presence. "Victoria, I need to take you to a doctor friend of mine today," Robert explained, trying to be as sincere as possible. "He's going to do a simple test that might help us understand a few things." The girl looked at him with suspicion. "What kind of test?" "A test to see if there's any relation between us." Victoria's eyes widened. "You think you're my dad?" The direct question caught Robert by surprise. He had hoped for more time to broach the possibility. "There's a chance." "Did you know your mother?" Victoria looked down, picking at her food with her fork. "Her name was Renee. She was pretty, had hair like mine. She got sick when I was 6. Robert felt a tightness in his chest. Renee, it was really her. "And after she passed, who did you stay with?" "With her Aunt Marlene. But she drank a lot and hit me. So I ran away." The simplicity with which Victoria narrated her personal tragedy was devastating. There was no self-pity in her tone, just a statement of facts that had shaped her young life. "How long have you been on the streets, Victoria?" "I don't know for sure. Maybe a year, maybe more." Michael, who had been listening quietly, took Victoria's hand in a clear gesture of solidarity. Robert watched their connection, feeling both excluded and moved. Dr. Andrew Campbell's office was in a prime area of Midtown Manhattan. As he drove, Robert watched the 2 children in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Victoria gazed out the window, absorbing the city as if cataloguing every detail in her memory. Michael drew in a small notepad, occasionally stopping to show his drawings to the girl. At the office, Dr. Campbell greeted them personally, dismissing his secretary. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes that immediately established a connection with Victoria. "So you're the young lady who got Michael talking again?" he asked, smiling at the girl. Victoria shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just said I would make him talk. He's the one who decided to speak." The response, so mature and yet so childlike, made Andrew exchange a meaningful look with Robert. "We're going to do a very simple test," Andrew explained, addressing Victoria. "I'm going to rub this cotton swab inside your cheek, like this, and on Robert's cheek too. It doesn't hurt at all. Is it to see if he's my dad?" "Exactly. And if he is, what happens to me?" The question hung in the air, laden with implications that none of the adults were prepared to address at that moment. "We'll take it one step at a time," Robert answered. avoiding making promises he might not be able to keep. After collecting the samples, Andrew informed them that the results would be available in 48 hours, a record time thanks to his influence at the lab. In the meantime, let's solve another problem, Robert said back in the car. We need to get you some new clothes. Victoria. The girl's eyes sparkled for a moment before dimming again. You don't have to spend money on me. Consider it a loan, Robert replied with a smile. You can pay me back when you're a successful adult. Saks Fifth Avenue, one of New York's most luxurious department stores, was not Victoria's usual environment. She walked through the aisles with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. In a children's department, Robert let her pick out some basic items. Can I really keep all of this? She asked, incredulous as she looked at the shopping bags. Of course you can. What if the test says you're not my dad? The question hit Robert like a punch. He hadn't considered that possibility. If Victoria wasn't his daughter, what was the explanation for the inexplicable connection with Michael? And more importantly, what would he do with her? Regardless of the result, Victoria, we'll find a solution. You won't go back to the streets. It was a bold promise, perhaps irresponsible, but Robert felt it was the only possible answer at that moment. Back at the apartment, they found Mrs. Carmen preparing lunch. The housekeeper had transformed the guest room, placing flowers in a small vase and setting out children's books from when Michael was younger. I thought she might like it, the woman explained when Robert asked about the changes. During lunch, Robert's phone rang. It was Mark Albright, his partner at Horizon Construction. Where are you, Robert? We have a meeting with the investors in half an hour. Robert had completely forgotten about the appointment. For the past few years, work had been his absolute priority. But at that moment, looking at the two children at the table, he felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in a long time. I can't make it. Mark, I have urgent family matters to attend to. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Family? Are you okay, Robert? I'm better than I've been in the last 3 years. Handle the meeting without me. I trust you. As he hung up, he noticed Victoria watching him curiously. You're not going to work because of me. Not just because of you, Victoria. Because of me, too. And for Michael. I've been neglecting what really matters for a long time. The afternoon passed with surprising tranquility. Michael and Victoria watched cartoons in the living room, while Robert, settled in his home office, did some research online. He was trying to find any information about Renee Silva, the young woman he had briefly loved a decade ago. After several fruitless searches, he found a small obituary in a local paper from 3 years prior. Renee Silva, 32, an architect, had passed away after a long battle with cancer, leaving behind a minor daughter. There was no mention of the child's father. 3 years. The same amount of time since Claire's accident. The same amount of time Michael had stopped speaking. Too many coincidences to be ignored. As he reflected on these discoveries, Robert was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Michael. Dad, can Victoria sleep in my room tonight? They were the longest words Michael had spoken since he started talking again. Why do you want that, son? She has nightmares. I do too. We can look after each other. The simplicity and depth of those words moved Robert. His son, who had lived immersed in silence for so long, was showing an empathy that many adults lacked. If she wants to, that's fine. Michael nodded and left. Robert followed him discreetly, watching as he relayed the permission to Victoria. The girl seemed relieved, as if she feared spending the night alone. During dinner, Robert tried to start a deeper conversation with Victoria. You mentioned your mom's name was Renee. Did she ever talk about me? The girl chewed slowly before answering. She had a picture of you. She said you were an important, busy man, that you couldn't be with us. Robert's heart ached. What kind of story had Renee told their daughter? Do you know why she never contacted me to tell me about you? Victoria shrugged, a gesture Robert was beginning to associate with moments when she avoided painful topics. She tried to call a bunch of times. Sent letters too, but you never answered. The revelation hit him like a bombshell. Robert had never received any calls, any letters from Renee after her sudden disappearance. What could have happened? Victoria, this is very important. Are you sure about what you're saying? Yes, I saw her calling, and I helped her mail the letters. Robert stood up abruptly from the table. There was only one possible explanation. Someone had intercepted Renee's attempts to contact him. And it could only be one person, Mark Albright, his partner, who at the time managed the company's communications and had access to Robert's office. Feeling anger rise within him, Robert picked up the phone, ready to confront Mark. But then he looked at the children at the table, watching him with apprehension, and he stopped himself. This wasn't the time for emotional outbursts. First, he needed to confirm his suspicions. Then he would think about the best way to get justice. "Is everything okay?" Victoria asked, showing a keen sensitivity to the emotional state of others. "It will be," Robert replied, forcing a smile. "Now how about some ice cream for dessert?" The girl's face lit up. For a moment, Robert glimpsed the child behind the hardened facade built by life on the streets. A child who, despite everything, could still find joy in the little things. Later, as the children got ready for bed, Robert sat on his apartment balcony, contemplating the illuminated city. New York, seen from that height, seemed peaceful, almost welcoming. But he knew that down below in the streets and alleys, children like Victoria fought daily for survival. If the test confirmed what his heart already knew, that Victoria was his daughter, his life would change forever. But in a way, it had already changed from the moment that small figure appeared on Fifth Avenue. Fate, with its characteristic irony, had chosen the precise moment to intertwine their paths. And Robert, for the first time in a long time, felt grateful for it. Before going to sleep, he passed by Michael's room. The children were already in bed, each at one end of the large mattress. Between them, like a silent guardian, was the small toy robot that Michael cherished so much. "Good night," Robert whispered. "Good night, Dad," Michael replied. "Good night, Robert," Victoria echoed, with the caution of someone still testing the limits of belonging. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Robert slept without nightmares. Something was beginning to heal in his shattered family, and he would do everything in his power to protect this fragile chance for a new beginning. Meanwhile, at Horizon Construction, Mark Albright nervously rummaged through his desk drawer, looking for a specific set of documents he had kept hidden for a decade. Robert's unusual call had left him uneasy. After so many years, was it possible for the past to surface? And if so, what consequences would it bring for his career, his reputation, and his friendship with Robert? With trembling hands, he found the yellowed envelope. Inside were undelivered letters, records of intercepted calls, and a substantial check made out to Renee Silver, on the condition that she never contact Robert again. Mark had believed he was protecting the interests of the company and his friend. Robert, at the time, was about to marry Claire, the daughter of one of the construction firm's biggest investors. A scandal involving an out-of-wedlock pregnancy could have had devastating consequences. But now, 10 years later, the justifications seemed hollow, the actions unforgivable. With a heavy sigh, Mark put the envelope away again. He needed to think about how to handle this situation if Robert discovered the truth. What he didn't know was that the truth was already knocking at his door, in the form of a little girl with curly hair who, against all odds, had found her way back home. Chapter 3. Blood Ties. Wednesday morning brought a phone call that Robert had been anxiously awaiting. Dr. Andrew Campbell was on the other end of the line, his voice carrying the weight of the information he was about to deliver. "Robert, I have the test results." There was a pause, and Robert felt his heart race. "And the compatibility is undeniable. You are Victoria's biological father, with 99.9999% certainty." Despite having expected this result, the official confirmation hit Robert like an avalanche of emotions. He was Victoria's father. The girl he had found by chance on the streets of New York was his daughter, his blood, a part of himself he hadn't known existed until 2 days ago. "Are you there, Robert?" "Yes," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm just processing all of this. I understand. It's impactful news, but I'd like to say something as a friend, not as a doctor. You have an opportunity to make a difference in this child's life. Don't waste it." "I won't, Andrew. Thank you for everything." After hanging up, Robert remained motionless for a few minutes, trying to organize his next steps. The first would be to tell Victoria, then start the legal process for acknowledging paternity, and finally, confront Mark about his role in this story. In the living room, he found Victoria and Michael playing a video game. A surprisingly normal scene given the extraordinary circumstances. "Victoria, can we talk for a minute?" The girl stood up, handing the controller to Michael, who seemed reluctant to pause the game. "Come to the study with me." In the organized space that reflected Robert's methodical personality, Victoria sat in the chair across from the desk, her legs dangling without touching the floor. "Dr. Campbell just called," Robert began, opting for direct honesty. "The test confirmed what we suspected. I am your biological father." Victoria's large, expressive eyes showed no surprise, just a quiet acceptance. "You don't seem surprised," Robert observed. "I already knew," she answered simply. "My mom always said you were my dad." "And how do you feel knowing it's true?" Victoria shrugged, that characteristic gesture Robert was beginning to interpret as her way of dealing with complex emotions. "Normal, I guess. It doesn't change much for me. You still don't really know me, and I don't know you. Being a dad isn't just about DNA, right?" The maturity of that observation took Robert by surprise. This child, only 10 years old, understood nuances of the paternal relationship that many adults never grasp. "You're absolutely right, Victoria. Being a father is about much more than blood. It's about care, presence, responsibility, and I really want to learn how to be your father, if you'll give me that chance." The girl studied him for a moment, her assessing gaze revealing a wisdom beyond her years. "Can I stay here with you and Michael?" "That's what I want to propose. This is your home now, Victoria. I'm going to start all the legal procedures to formalize your adoption and my acknowledgement of paternity." "What if someone tries to take me away?" "That's not going to happen," Robert assured her, with a conviction that surprised even himself. "You are my daughter, and this is your place." A small smile, the first genuine one Robert had seen on her face, lit up Victoria's features. "Can I tell Michael?" "Of course you can." The girl stood up and ran to the living room, leaving Robert with his thoughts. There was so much to be done, so many decisions to make. But the first step was taken. Victoria was officially part of his family. The next step would be to confront Mark. Robert picked up the phone and dialed the number for his partner's office. "Mark, I need to talk to you. It's important." "Of course, Robert." "Is there a problem?" "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come to my apartment tonight?" There was a perceptible hesitation on the other end of the line. "Tonight? Is it about the company?" "Not directly. It's a personal matter that could have professional implications." "I'll be there at 8, Mark replied, his voice betraying a slight tremor. As he hung up, Robert felt a mix of anger and disappointment. If his suspicions were correct, Mark, his friend and partner of so many years, had deliberately interfered in his life, depriving him of the chance to know and raise his daughter. In the middle of the afternoon, while Robert was working in his study, reviewing company documents, he heard the doorbell ring. Mrs. Carman announced the arrival of Aunt Audrey, Claire's older sister. Robert suppressed a groan. Audrey Palmer was a 60-year-old widow with firm conservative opinions about everything. Since Claire's passing, she had taken on the role of guardian of the family values, visiting regularly to check on how Michael was being raised. "Robert, my dear, how I've missed you," Audrey exclaimed as she entered the study. She was an elegant woman with impeccably styled grey hair and discreet but priceless jewelry. "Aunt Audrey, what a surprise." "I didn't know you were coming today. Mrs. Carman called me. She said there was a situation I should be aware of." Robert shot an annoyed glance toward the kitchen. The housekeeper, apparently, had felt it necessary to inform Audrey about Victoria's arrival. "Yes, we have a new resident," Robert confirmed, standing up. "Come and meet her." In the living room, Michael and Victoria were immersed in a complex jigsaw puzzle. Upon seeing Audrey, Michael stood up and gave her a polite hug without saying a word. "Michael, my prince, how are you?" Audrey kissed the top of his head before turning her gaze to Victoria. "And who is this young lady?" Before Robert could answer, Michael said with surprising clarity, "This is Victoria, my sister." Audrey froze, her wavering smile turning into an expression of shock. "Your sister? Robert, what is he talking about?" "Aunt Audrey, this is Victoria, my daughter," Robert explained, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder, who was watching the interaction cautiously. "I only recently found out about her. She's from a relationship I had before my marriage to Claire." Audrey's face went through several emotions: surprise, confusion, and finally, poorly disguised disapproval. I see. And where is this girl's mother? She passed away a few years ago. I understand. And you just decided to bring this child home without considering the implications. Aunt Audrey, Robert's voice took on a warning tone. Victoria is my daughter, confirmed by a DNA test. She belongs in this family. Family? Audrey repeated with a dry laugh. Robert, you can't just pick up a child from the street and declare she's part of the family. There are protocols, legal processes. I'm aware of that and I'm handling all the legal aspects. But regardless of the paperwork, Victoria is my daughter and Michael's sister. Victoria, sensing the growing tension, took a step back, instinctively moving closer to Michael. She seems like a nice girl, Audrey conceded, softening her tone slightly. But have you considered what this means for the family's reputation? For Michael's future? For Claire's legacy? Claire's legacy was one of love and acceptance, Robert replied firmly. She would have welcomed Victoria just as Michael has. Michael hasn't spoken in 3 years, Robert. You can't trust his judgment now. Actually, Michael started speaking again since Victoria arrived. She accomplished what doctors and therapists couldn't in 3 years. The information seemed to shake Audrey. She looked at Michael, who held a defiant expression unusual for his normally serene face. Is that true, Michael? You're talking now. Yes, he replied as if to prove the point. Victoria is my sister and she's staying. Audrey's lips tightened into a thin line. It was clear she wasn't convinced, but Michael's unexpected display of assertiveness had left her without an immediate argument. Well, I see you've already made your decision. I sincerely hope you don't regret it. Street children often carry problems. Aunt Audrey, Robert was genuinely shocked by the blatant prejudice. I'm just being realistic, Robert. You know nothing about her past, about the influences she's had. What if she has problematic tendencies? I don't steal if that's what you're thinking, Victoria intervened with dignity. And I don't do drugs either. I just wanted a safe place to sleep. Audrey's face flushed slightly, embarrassed at being confronted so directly by a child. That's not what I meant, dear. I'm just concerned about everyone's adjustment. We're adjusting just fine, Robert assured her, putting an end to the discussion. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have an appointment soon. It was a lie, but Robert needed to end the visit before Audrey caused any more damage. Of course. I just came to check on you all. Audrey picked up her purse, heading for the door. Robert, can we speak privately for a moment? In the foyer, out of the children's earshot, Audrey adopted a more conciliatory tone. Robert, don't misunderstand me. I'm not against you helping this girl. It's a noble gesture, but bringing her to live here, introducing her as part of the family, it's rash. Why not put her in a good boarding school? You can pay for an excellent education without having to fully integrate her into your life. Robert felt a wave of indignation rise within him. Aunt Audrey, with all due respect, Victoria is not a charity project. She is my daughter, and this is her house, her home. I'm not sending her to any boarding school, no matter how good it is. You're being emotional, not rational. Perhaps because being a father isn't a purely rational matter. Robert opened the door, clearly indicating that the visit was over. I appreciate your concern, but my decision is final. Very well, Audrey conceded, adjusting the scarf around her neck. But don't say I didn't warn you. This situation could get very complicated very quickly. After Audrey left, Robert returned to the living room to find Michael and Victoria whispering to each other. She didn't like me, Victoria stated matter-of-factly. Aunt Audrey is traditional, Robert explained, searching for a diplomatic word. It takes her time to adjust to change. But don't worry about it. Will she come back? Probably. But this is your home now, Victoria. No one has the power to change that. Not even Aunt Audrey. Michael, sitting next to Victoria, took her hand in a protective gesture that moved Robert. We won't let anyone take you, the boy said with surprising determination. That display of solidarity seemed to touch Victoria deeply. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, and she squeezed Michael's hand in silent gratitude. That evening, promptly at 8 o'clock, the doorbell rang again. It was Mark Albright, Robert's partner for over 15 years and Until a few days ago, one of his most trusted friends. "Come in, Mark. Let's talk in the study." Mark was a man of average height, with prematurely graying hair and a smile that usually inspired confidence. That night, however, he seemed tense, his restless hands betraying his nervousness. "Would you like a drink?" Robert offered, heading to the small bar in the corner of the study. "A scotch?" "Please, neat." Robert poured 2 glasses, handing one to Mark before sitting behind his desk. "So what's this urgent matter?" Robert took a sip of his drink, studying his partner's face. "Do you remember Renee Silva?" The change in Mark's expression was immediate and revealing. His face paled and he nearly dropped his glass. "Renee? The architecture intern from years ago?" "Vaguely." "Don't lie, Mark, you knew her well. Well enough to interfere in our relationship." Mark placed his glass on the desk, his eyes avoiding direct contact with Robert's. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about intercepting phone calls, about hiding letters, about paying Renee to disappear from my life." "Who told you this? It's absurd." "My daughter told me." "Your daughter?" "Michael is a boy, Robert, and he barely speaks." "I'm not talking about Michael." Robert pressed a button on his desk intercom. "Mrs. Carmen, could you bring Victoria in for a moment?" Seconds later, the study door opened, and Victoria entered, her eyes immediately fixing on Mark with cautious curiosity. "Mark, this is Victoria. My daughter with Renee Silva." The shock on Mark's face was genuine. He looked from the girl to Robert, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. "Victoria, do you recognize this man?" The girl observed Mark intently for a few seconds before answering. "I'm not sure, but I think he came to our apartment once. My mum cried a lot after he left." Robert nodded, thanking Victoria. "Thank you, sweetie. You can go back with Michael now." When the door closed behind Victoria, Robert turned his gaze back to Mark, who looked as though he had aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "I want the truth. Mark, all of it." The man took a deep breath, running a hand through his grey hair. "It was 10 years ago, Robert. You were about to marry Claire. Her father had just invested millions in Horizon. A scandal could have ruined everything. So you made the decision for me. I did what I thought was best for the company, for all of us." "Best for whom, Mark?" "Certainly not for Renee, who raised our daughter alone. Not for Victoria, who grew up without knowing her father. And not for me, who was deprived of fatherhood by your interference. I was just trying to protect you, Robert. You and Claire were the perfect couple, and her father's investment saved Horizon from bankruptcy. At the cost of my daughter." Robert's voice trembled with contained rage. "How much did you pay Renee to disappear?" Mark looked away, ashamed. $200,000. 200,000. Robert laughed humorlessly. "You valued my daughter's paternity at $200,000. She took the money, Robert. She could have refused. After you convinced her that I wanted nothing to do with her or the child. After you intercepted every attempt she made to contact me." Mark didn't answer, his silence a confession more eloquent than any words. "I want all the records. Mark, every letter, every message, every call log, everything. That was 10 years ago. I don't have any of that anymore." "Don't lie. You've always been too meticulous not to keep records." Mark sighed, defeated. "I have some things in the office safe. I can bring them tomorrow. Tonight. Now." "Robert, it's almost 9 o'clock. And you destroyed 10 years of my daughter's life. I think you can sacrifice an hour of your precious time to start making up for it." Mark nodded, rising to his feet. "I'll go get them. I'll be back in an hour." When Mark left, Robert allowed himself a moment of silent fury. His friend, his business partner, had deliberately interfered in his personal life, altering its course irreparably. Lost years that could never be recovered. But the anger soon gave way to a cold determination. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still in his hands. And Robert would do everything in his power to ensure that Victoria would never again suffer from neglect or abandonment. Chapter 4. Threats from the Past. A week had passed since the confirmation of Victoria's paternity. The routine in the Miller apartment was beginning to take on new shape, adapting to the girl's vibrant presence. Michael continued to surprise everyone with his progress in communication, speaking in increasingly complete sentences and expressing his thoughts with a clarity that had seemed impossible just days before. On that Monday morning, Robert was preparing to return to work after a week's leave, the first he had taken in years. The decision to go back to the Horizon construction office wasn't easy, especially after the revelations about Mark's behavior. But there were practical matters to resolve, and Robert needed to ensure the business kept running while he reorganized his personal life. "Are you sure you have to go?" Victoria asked, sitting at the breakfast table, watching Robert pack his briefcase. "Unfortunately, yes. But I'll be back in the late afternoon. Mrs. Carmen will be with you, and if there's any emergency, just call me." "What are we going to do today?" Michael asked, surprising everyone by initiating the question. "I thought we could start looking for a school for Victoria," Robert replied. "We're already in the middle of the school year, but with some private tutoring, she can catch up with the rest of the class." Victoria's eyes shone for a moment before dimming again. "I never went to school much," she confessed in a low voice. "Only until 2nd grade." Robert felt a fresh wave of anger toward Mark, toward the negligent aunt who should have cared for Victoria, and toward himself for not having been there. But he maintained his composure, aware that emotional displays wouldn't help at the moment. "Don't worry. We'll figure it out. You're a smart girl. I'm sure you'll adapt quickly." Victoria's shy smile warmed Robert's heart. In recent days, these moments of genuine vulnerability had become more frequent, signs that the protective armor the girl had built was slowly beginning to crack. Before leaving, Robert received a call from Mr. Charles Fisher, his personal attorney, confirming that the documents for acknowledging paternity and regularizing custody of Victoria were ready for his signature. "Excellent, Charles. Can I stop by your office after work?" "Actually, Robert, I'd prefer to come to your company. I have other appointments downtown today." "Perfect. I'll expect you at 5. Upon arriving at the headquarters of Horizon Construction, an imposing building in New York's financial heart, Robert was greeted with the usual deference. His secretary, Marissa, a competent woman who had been with him for over a decade, seemed relieved to see him. "Mr. Miller, it's good to have you back. We have several pending issues. The Hudson Yards complex project is facing some licensing problems, and the investors for the Hamptons Resort are pushing for a meeting." "Thank you, Marissa. We'll handle one thing at a time. Is Mark in?" "He came in early today, but he seems a bit down." "He's been locked in his office ever since." Robert nodded, unsurprised. Since the confrontation at his apartment, Mark had avoided direct contact, communicating only through brief, strictly professional emails. The envelope with Renee's letters and records had been delivered by a courier, accompanied by a formal note of apology that sounded more like a legal document than a sincere gesture of remorse. After dealing with the company's most urgent matters, Robert decided it was time for a definitive conversation with his partner. He went to Mark's office unannounced, finding him engrossed in paperwork on his desk. "We need to talk," Robert announced, closing the door behind him. Mark looked up, visibly uncomfortable. "Robert, I really don't know what more I can say. I made a serious error in judgment in the past, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. This isn't just about making it right, Mark. It's about consequences." Robert sat down across from his partner. "I read all the letters you intercepted. I saw the call logs. Renee tried to contact me dozens of times over the years. I know, and I deeply regret it. Your regret doesn't change the fact that my daughter grew up without a father, ended up on the streets after her mother's death, and could have met a tragic end if not for an almost miraculous coincidence." Mark looked down, unable to meet Robert's accusing gaze. "What do you want from me, Robert?" "I want you to establish a trust fund for Victoria in the amount of $5 million. $5 million? Mark paled. "Robert, it's the price of your interference in our lives. Consider it an investment in my daughter's future, to compensate for everything she lost because of you. And if I refuse, then I'll have to reconsider our partnership at Horizon, and possibly take legal action against you and the company for emotional distress." The threat hung in the air, heavy and tangible. Mark knew Robert wasn't bluffing. A lawsuit of that nature, beyond the financial consequences, would have a devastating impact on the construction firm's reputation and his own image in the market. "All right," he finally conceded. "I'll set up the fund, but I want this to definitively close the matter between us. The financial matter, yes, As for our friendship and trust, that will take much longer to rebuild, if it's even possible. Mark's expression showed that he understood the magnitude of his betrayal. It wasn't just about money or business. It was about loyalty, principles, and above all, an innocent child whose life had been profoundly affected by his actions. "I understand," he said simply. "I'll have the fund documents prepared by the end of the week." "Good. And Mark, one more thing. I want you to personally tell Victoria what you did. She deserves to hear it directly from you." "Is that really necessary, Robert? She's just a child. A child who grew up too fast because of circumstances. She'll understand more than you think. And she needs to know it wasn't you who abandoned her, but that there was outside interference." Mark sighed, resigned. "When?" "Next Sunday. Lunch at my house." Meanwhile, in Robert's apartment, Victoria and Michael were engaged in an activity organized by Mrs. Carmen. The housekeeper, initially hesitant about the girl's presence, now showed a growing affection for her, impressed by her resilience and the positive impact she had on Michael. "Look, Mrs. Carmen, I drew our family," Michael exclaimed, showing a colorful sheet where 5 figures were clearly identifiable: Robert, Michael, Victoria, Mrs. Carmen, and a large brown dog that still existed only in the boy's imagination. "It's beautiful, my dear." The housekeeper looked at Victoria, who was also drawing intently. "And what are you making?" "A map of the neighborhood," the girl replied, holding up her drawing. It was a surprisingly detailed representation of the nearby streets, with easily recognizable landmarks. "So I know the way home in case I get lost." Mrs. Carmen and Michael exchanged a look of understanding. For a child who had lived on the streets, knowing escape and return routes was a matter of survival. "You won't get lost," Michael assured her with conviction, "and if you do, I'll find you." The quiet moment was interrupted by the doorbell. Mrs. Carmen went to answer and returned to the living room accompanied by Audrey, whose expression revealed she had still not come to terms with the new family arrangement. "I brought a gift for Michael," she announced, handing a package to the boy. "It's that strategy game you wanted." "Thank you, Auntie," Michael replied politely, but without the enthusiasm he would normally show. "And I brought something for you, too. Victoria." Audrey held out a smaller package to the girl, who received it with evident surprise. "They're some children's books. Carmen told me you like to read." "Thank you," Victoria replied, suspicious of the change in attitude. "May I speak with the children alone for a moment, Carmen?" Audrey asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The housekeeper hesitated, casting a protective glance at the children. "I don't know if Mr. Miller would approve. It's just for a few minutes, dear. Family matters." Reluctantly, Mrs. Carmen retreated to the kitchen, but not before giving Victoria a significant look, as if to say, "I'll be close by." As soon as they were alone, Audrey sat on the sofa, her rigid posture contrasting with her attempt to appear casual. "So, Victoria, I'm curious about you. Robert said your mother passed away a few years ago. How did you survive since then?" The direct question caught Victoria by surprise, but she answered with her characteristic frankness. "I stayed with Aunt Marlene for a while. Then I went to the streets. And during that time, on the streets." "You must have met a lot of people." "Made friends. Some," Victoria replied cautiously. "Mostly temporary." "And do these people know where you are now?" Michael, sensing the inquisitive tone, moved closer to Victoria protectively. "Why are you asking that, Auntie?" Audrey smiled, a gesture that didn't reach her cold eyes. "I'm just concerned for your safety. If Victoria has connections with less reputable people, it could pose a risk to the family." "I'm not friends with criminals, if that's what you're asking," Victoria replied, with a dignity that defied her age. "And I'm not a spy who's going to rob the place later." Audrey had the decency to look embarrassed. "That's not what I meant, dear. I just want to make sure everyone is safe." "The only one who isn't safe here is me," Victoria retorted, "because some people don't want me here." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Audrey seemed genuinely surprised by the girl's perceptiveness. "It's not about not wanting you here, Victoria. It's about protecting this family's legacy. Michael is Claire's heir. He carries the Palmer name. And Robert, well, Robert has been emotionally vulnerable since she passed. Perhaps he's seeing you as a way to fill a void. Or maybe he just wants to be a father to his own daughter," Michael intervened with unusual assertiveness. "Victoria is my sister, Aunt Audrey, and she's staying." Before the argument could continue, the living room door opened, revealing Mrs. Carmen, who had evidently been listening to the conversation. "The children need to have their snack now," she announced, with a firmness that allowed no argument. "And Mr. Miller should be home soon." Audrey stood up, smoothing her impeccable skirt. "Of course, I don't want to disrupt the routine. I'll come back another day for a longer visit." When the apartment door closed behind Audrey, Mrs. Carmen turned to the children. "Don't you worry about her. Mrs. Palmer has her ways. But deep down, she cares about the family." "She doesn't like me," Victoria stated without resentment, simply stating a fact. "She doesn't know you yet," Mrs. Carmen corrected gently. "Give it time. Now how about those brownies I promised?" The rest of the afternoon passed quietly, with the children helping Mrs. Carmen bake a chicken pot pie for dinner, the first time Victoria had participated in preparing a family meal. Her expression of pride as she saw the golden brown pie come out of the oven was a testament to how small gestures of inclusion could have a profound impact on someone who had never had a sense of belonging. Around 5:30, the apartment phone rang. It was Robert, informing them he would be about an hour late due to a prolonged meeting with his lawyer. "Are you kids okay?" he asked after explaining the delay. "Yes, Dad," Michael replied. "We made a pie for dinner." "We?" Robert repeated, surprised and delighted. "Victoria and I helped, Mrs. Carmen. It's going to be the best pie you've ever eaten." The excitement in Michael's voice was contagious. Robert couldn't remember hearing so much enthusiasm from his son since before the accident. "I can't wait to try it." "You're my little chefs now." After hanging up, Robert turned his attention back to Mr. Charles Fisher, who was analyzing the documents on the table. "Everything is in order, Robert. With these papers, you officially acknowledge paternity and secure legal custody of Victoria. Considering the exceptional circumstances, abandonment by the aunt, her situation on the streets, the judge will likely expedite the process." "How long until everything is formalized?" "Hard to say. In normal cases, it would take weeks, maybe months. But I know the judge in family court and can explain the urgency. We might get a decision in 10 days. And during that time, is there any chance someone could contest my custody of her?" "Technically, yes. If a maternal relative appears and claims rights, or if Child Protective Services finds irregularities, there could be a challenge. But with the DNA test, your stable financial situation, and the child's evident well-being with you, those possibilities are remote." Robert nodded, feeling more at ease. Each step in this process was an additional guarantee that Victoria would remain safe, under his roof and protection. Meanwhile, a few blocks from Robert's luxurious apartment, a man was carefully watching the building's activity. Gus Santos, known on the streets of Chinatown as Blade, ran a small group that exploited vulnerable children, forcing them to beg in busy areas and participate in petty theft. Victoria, with her fragile appearance and expressive eyes, had been one of the most profitable attractions of his scheme for months. Her disappearance had been a significant financial loss, and now, thanks to information bought from a security guard at the condominium, Gus knew exactly where she was. The girl hit the jackpot. He commented to his accomplice, Tuck, a young man in his 20s with a prominent scar on his chin. "Found her rich daddy. That's gold for us." "What are you planning, Gus?" "A profitable negotiation. The executive must be willing to pay good money to keep his little girl safe, don't you think?" Tuck grinned, revealing nicotine-stained teeth. "When do we make our move?" "Their patience. First, we need to understand the routine, find out when she's most vulnerable. And then," Gus made a grabbing motion with his hand, "we secure our financial future." What Gus and Tuck didn't know was that their actions were being observed by a third party. Jonas Pierce, a private security guard discreetly hired by Robert after discovering Victoria, maintained constant surveillance around the condominium. And now he was recording the presence of these suspicious men with his camera. Fate, once again, was weaving its invisible threads, connecting lives and setting the stage for inevitable confrontations. And at the center of this complex web was a little girl who only wanted the most basic of human rights, to belong. Chapter 5. The Abduction. Sunday arrived with the sun shining over New York, one of those rare days when the metropolis's sky showed a clean blue without the usual layer of smog. In the Miller apartment, Preparations for lunch were in full swing. Mrs. Carmen orchestrated the kitchen like a conductor, delegating simple tasks to Michael and Victoria, who were enthusiastic participants. "Victoria, be careful cutting those tomatoes," the housekeeper warned, watching the girl handle a small knife. "Fingers away from the blade." "I know how to cook, Mrs. Carmen," Victoria replied with a smile that softened the statement. "You learn a lot on the streets." The sentence, spoken so naturally, caused a moment of awkward silence. It was always disconcerting when Victoria mentioned her previous life, not out of shame, but for the rawness with which she exposed realities most preferred to ignore. "Well then, show me what you can do," Mrs. Carmen replied, recovering quickly. "We can learn from each other." Robert, in his study, was finishing a call with Jonas Pierce, the security guard hired to monitor the area around the condominium. "And you're sure they were watching the building?" "Absolutely, Mr. Miller," Jonas replied, his deep voice conveying concern. "I have it all on camera. I've already sent the photos to your email. These are individuals known for exploiting homeless minors. Any immediate risk?" "Hard to say. They seem to be in an observation phase, studying routines. The most prudent course of action would be to increase security and perhaps reconsider the girl's movements." "Understood. Continue monitoring and inform me of any suspicious activity. I'll evaluate additional measures." After hanging up, Robert felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Victoria's safety, already a priority, now took on a sense of urgency. If those men were indeed exploiters of vulnerable children, they could pose a concrete threat. His thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell. It was Mark Albright arriving for lunch as planned. His tense face revealed the discomfort of someone preparing for a difficult confession. "Come in, Mark. The kids are in the kitchen, helping with lunch." "Robert, before I speak with Victoria, I need to be sure this is really necessary. She's too young to understand the nuances of this situation." "The necessity isn't for her to understand, Mark. It's for you to take responsibility for your actions, face to face with the person who was most harmed. And believe me, Victoria understands more than you can imagine." Mark nodded, resigned. There was no avoiding this moment. In the dining room, the table was set with a care that reflected the importance Robert placed on this lunch. It wasn't just a meal. It was a ritual of acknowledgement, of family integration, of settling accounts with the past. "Kids, come meet Mark," Robert called, when everyone was ready to be seated. Michael and Victoria entered the room, the boy with his usual shy smile, the girl with a cautious expression, as if she sensed the gravity of the meeting. "Michael, look how you've grown," Mark commented, trying to sound natural. "And you must be Victoria. I'm Mark, your father's business partner. You're the man who came to my mom's apartment," Victoria stated without hesitation, her eyes fixed on Mark with an unsettling intensity. The man paled, clearly surprised by the girl's memory. "Yes, we met briefly, a long time ago. You made my mom cry." The direct statement created an awkward silence. Robert looked at Mark with an expression that clearly said, "This is your cue." "Victoria," Mark began hesitantly, "there are things from the past we need to talk about, but maybe not during lunch." "There's no better time," Robert intervened. "We're all here as a family, and what you have to say affects all of us." Mark took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the face of each person present before settling on Victoria again. 10 years ago, when your mother and father met, I made a grave mistake. Your mother tried to contact your father several times to tell him about her pregnancy, but I intercepted those attempts. I stopped the letters from arriving, I blocked the calls." Victoria listened attentively, showing no surprise, only a gradual understanding. "Why?" she asked simply. Because your father was about to marry Michael's mother, because there were financial interests involved, because I thought I was protecting everyone." Mark hesitated. "But I was wrong. Deeply wrong. You paid my mom to disappear." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Victoria's memory was impressively accurate for someone so young. "Yes, I offered her money so she wouldn't insist on contacting Robert. It was an unforgivable mistake, one that affected many lives. And now?" Victoria's question was loaded with implications. "Now I am here to ask for forgiveness. From you, especially, and to try in some way to repair the damage I caused." Victoria looked at Robert as if seeking guidance. The executive gave a slight nod, encouraging her to express her feelings. My mum was very sad after you left, Victoria said finally. She cried for days. She said my dad didn't want us. Mark looked down, unable to hold the girl's accusing gaze. That was a lie. Robert never knew about you. If I had known, Robert interrupted, I would have taken my responsibility immediately. I would have been your father from day one. A dense silence followed this declaration. Michael, who had been watching everything intently, took Victoria's hand in a gesture of silent solidarity. Okay, Victoria said simply. The food's getting cold. The girl's apparent indifference disconcerted the adults. It was as if for her the past was just that, the past. What mattered was the present, the hot food on the table, her brother's hand holding hers, the security of a home. Lunch proceeded with trivial conversation, avoiding the delicate subject. But after everyone had finished dessert, a crème brûlée prepared by Mrs. Carman, Mark asked for a moment alone with Victoria. I have something important to give you. In Robert's study, Mark opened his briefcase and took out a sealed envelope. This is a document establishing a trust fund in your name, Victoria. $5 million which will be managed by your father until you turn 21. After that, it will be entirely yours. Victoria's eyes widened. $5 million? That's a lot of money. It's the least I can do to compensate for the lost years. This money will ensure your education, your financial security, and eventually, the ability to pursue your dreams. Victoria looked at the envelope, then at Mark, an enigmatic expression on her young face. Thank you, she said finally. But I would have preferred to have my dad from the beginning. The simplicity of that response hit Mark like a physical blow. No financial compensation, no matter how large, could replace the years of paternal absence, of insecurity, of emotional and material deprivation. I know, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. And for that I ask for your forgiveness. You're forgiven, Victoria replied with surprising maturity. My mom always said that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. Mark smiled, genuinely touched by the wisdom of this child who, despite everything, could still find room for understanding and forgiveness. When they returned to the living room, they found Robert on the phone, his tense face revealing that something serious was happening. Understood, Jonas. Keep me informed. They'll take care of things here. Hanging up, Robert turned to Mark and Victoria. Everything settled between you two? They both nodded, the girl firmly clutching the envelope that represented her financial future. Good. Mark, thank you for coming. Now I have some urgent matters to attend to. The farewell was brief, with Mark promising to stay in touch and reiterating his commitment to Victoria's well-being. When the door closed, Robert gathered the children and Mrs. Carman in the living room. We need to talk about security, he announced seriously. Jonas, the guard I hired, has identified suspicious people watching our building, people who might be connected to the time Victoria was on the streets. Victoria's eyes widened in recognition. Blade? She asked, her voice suddenly small. I don't know the name. Do you know someone with that nickname? Victoria nodded, visibly shaken. Gus, he's dangerous. He makes kids beg for money at traffic lights and give it all to him later. Anyone who doesn't gets beaten. Robert felt a surge of fury imagining his daughter subjected to such exploitation, but he maintained his composure, aware that he needed to be rational at that moment. Victoria, until we resolve this situation, you will not go out alone under any circumstances. Michael, you either. I'm hiring additional security, and if necessary, we will seek help from the authorities. He won't give up, Victoria warned, speaking from experience. Blade is persistent, and now that he knows where I am. He won't touch you, Robert stated with conviction. I promise. Robert's words seemed to temporarily calm the girl, but her gaze remained apprehensive, heavy with the weight of a familiar fear. In the following days, Robert significantly increased security at the apartment and for the family's movements. 2 private guards worked shifts in the building's lobby, and the children only went out accompanied by Robert or Mrs. Carman, always with an escort. On Wednesday, however, a complication arose. Mrs. Carman had to leave due to a family emergency, and Robert had an unmissable meeting with foreign investors. The solution was to take the children to the construction company, where they could stay in the conference room under the supervision of Marisa, his trusted secretary. You'll be fine here, Robert assured them. settling Michael and Victoria in the comfortable room, equipped with a television, games, and snacks. My meeting shouldn't last more than 2 hours. Then we'll have lunch together and go home. Can we go to the movies later? Michael asked, excited by the idea of a different outing. We'll see, Robert replied, smiling at his son. Now be good and listen to Marisa. The meeting, however, dragged on longer than expected. The Japanese investors had numerous questions about the real estate project on the coast, and each point required detailed explanations. Robert, normally patient in negotiations, found himself restless, checking his watch every few minutes. At 12:30, Marisa sent a reassuring text. Kids are having lunch in the conference room. All quiet. Robert breathed a sigh of relief. Another hour, and he would be free to return to his fatherly duties. What he didn't know was that at the very moment he read the message, a plan was being set in motion in the construction company's parking garage. Gus, Blade, and Tuck had identified a vulnerability in the family's routine: the trip to the office on that specific day. Disguised as deliverymen, they watched as Robert's private driver left for lunch. It was the opportunity they had been waiting for. Showtime, Gus muttered, adjusting the fake badge on his chest. Remember, Tuck, we go in, grab the girl, and get out. Quick and clean. In the lobby of Horizon Construction, the receptionist was easily fooled by the badge and the story that they needed to speak with the children about an alleged incident involving their father. Without question, she indicated the floor and the room. Marisa, Robert's secretary, was more cautious. I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to speak with the children without Mr. Miller present. If you'd like to wait. Ma'am, Gus interrupted with feigned authority, this is an emergency situation involving Mr. Miller's safety. We need information from the children immediately. While Marisa hesitated, Tuck took the opportunity to push her aside, clearing the way to the conference room. Inside, Michael and Victoria were finishing their lunch, oblivious to the imminent danger. Upon seeing Gus, Victoria froze, her face instantly paling. Well, well, Princess, Gus greeted her with a sinister smile. Miss me? Who are you? Michael asked, positioning himself protectively in front of his sister. Out of the way, kid. This isn't about you. Victoria, recovering from the initial shock, pulled Michael back. Go get help, she whispered urgently. Run! Michael hesitated for only a second before bolting toward the door. Tuck tried to stop him, but the boy was agile and slipped under his arms, reaching the hallway. Let him go, Gus ordered. We got what we came for. Victoria tried to run but was quickly grabbed by Gus, who covered her mouth with one hand while lifting her off the ground with the other. Stay quiet and you won't get hurt. Got it? The girl nodded, her eyes wide with terror. In the hallway, Michael ran desperately toward the meeting room where his father was. Marisa, recovering from being pushed, was already pressing the silent alarm that would alert building security. But it was too late. Gus and Tuck, with Victoria held firmly in Gus's arms, were heading quickly to the service elevator, avoiding the main cameras. In the parking garage, a car was waiting, engine running. In less than 5 minutes from their entry, the kidnappers and their victim left the premises, blending into the heavy downtown New York traffic. When Robert was finally alerted minutes later, the only eyewitness to the kidnapping was Michael, whose terror had momentarily returned him to his previous mutism. The boy was trembling, unable to articulate what he had witnessed. Michael, son, I need you to talk to me, Robert pleaded, kneeling in front of the boy. What happened to Victoria? But Michael just stared blankly at a point beyond his father, as if reliving the terrible scene. It was Marisa who provided the crucial information. 2 men, pretending to be police officers, one tall, thin, with a scar on his face, the other shorter, stocky, with a fake badge. They took Victoria by force and left through the service elevator. I called security as soon as I could, but how long ago? Robert asked, his voice betraying his growing desperation. 10, maybe 15 minutes. 15 minutes. An eternity in a kidnapping. Enough time for the captors to disappear into the bowels of the largest city in America. Robert's phone rang at that moment. An unknown number. With a racing heart, he answered, Miller. Famous executive, who would have thought? Your little street kid has a rich dad now. The voice on the other end was rough, with a tone of cruel mockery. Who is this? Someone who has something very precious of yours. Something worth, let's say, $1 million. Where is my daughter? If you hurt her, She's fine for now. Keeping it that way is up to you. 1 million cash, 24 hours. I want to speak to her. There was a moment of silence, followed by a small, frightened voice. Dad? That single word filled with fear and hope tore Robert's heart apart. Victoria. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? No, I'm scared. The kidnapper came back on the line. See? She's in one piece. But don't test my patience. 1 million. Instructions for the drop will be sent to your phone. No cops, no tricks. The call ended, leaving Robert in a state of cold despair. His daughter, who had only recently found her way back into his life, was now in the hands of ruthless criminals, and he had only 24 hours to save her. Without wasting a moment, Robert contacted Jonas Pierce, the private security guard, and his internal security team. He wouldn't involve the police, at least not directly. The risk to Victoria was too great. But he would use every resource at his disposal to locate and rescue his daughter. I'm going to get her back, he promised Michael, who remained silent, but whose expression revealed unbearable anguish. Your sister is coming home. That's a promise. Meanwhile, in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Victoria sat on a dirty mattress, watching her captors with a mix of fear and calculation. It wasn't the first time she had faced dangerous situations on the streets, but she had never been so vulnerable, so isolated. Why did you take me? She finally asked, her voice small but firm. My dad is going to call the police. Gus laughed, a humorless sound. Your dad will do exactly as we say. He has too much money and loves you too much to take any chances. And when we get paid, you go back to your little princess life. And if he doesn't pay, Gus's smile vanished. Then we go back to our old partnership. You beg at traffic lights, I keep the money. Just like old times. Victoria flinched, the fear evident in her eyes. She knew that reality all too well, and knew that this time Gus wouldn't be as gentle as before. The kidnapping had raised the stakes, and he wouldn't tolerate another escape. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather her thoughts. Her father would come for her, she was sure of it. Robert had kept every promise he had made so far, to welcome her, protect her, love her. He wouldn't abandon her now. And while she waited, she would do what she had always done on the streets: observe, plan, wait for the right moment. Survival was an art she had mastered, even at 10 years old. And this time she wasn't alone. She had a family waiting for her. She had a home to return to. Chapter 6. The Rescue. The hours following the kidnapping were the longest of Robert Miller's life. In his Upper East Side penthouse, now a makeshift command center, he coordinated the efforts to find Victoria. Jonas Pierce, the private security expert, had mobilized a team of 4 men, all former NYPD officers with experience in crisis situations. On a table in the center of the living room, city maps were spread out, marked with potential hideout locations. These red dots are areas known to harbor criminal hideouts, Jonas explained, pointing to several marks on the outskirts of New York City. Considering the kidnapper's profile and the time elapsed since the abduction, we're focusing our search within this radius. Robert stared at the map, his eyes burning with exhaustion and worry. He hadn't slept since receiving news of the kidnapping 20 hours ago. His phone never left his hand, awaiting the promised instructions for the ransom drop. Michael remained in his room, still in a state of shock. Mrs. Carmen, who had rushed back after being informed of what happened, tried in vain to get him to eat or sleep. The boy simply sat on his bed, clutching the toy robot he had once shared with Victoria, his eyes fixed on the door as if expecting his sister to walk in at any moment. Sir, we have information on the car used in the kidnapping, one of the security men announced, entering the room with a tablet. Traffic cameras recorded a silver Chevy sedan leaving the construction company's garage at the time of the abduction. The plates are fake, but we managed to track the vehicle to Queens. Queens? Robert frowned, trying to process the information. That gives us a direction at least. At that moment his phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Million cash. Washington Square Park, tomorrow 10 a.m. Come alone. Further details will be provided on site. No cops or the girl disappears forever. Robert felt his heart race. The message was brief but telling. The choice of Washington Square Park, a busy public space in downtown Manhattan, indicated the kidnappers didn't intend to make the exchange there. It was just a starting point for subsequent instructions. "They've made contact," he announced, showing the message to Jonas. "Washington Square Park. Tomorrow morning." The security expert studied the message, his face a mask of intense concentration. "It's a smart location for them. Crowded, multiple escape routes, difficult to monitor. I don't mean to question your decisions, Mr. Miller, but we need to consider involving the police. The kidnapping task force has specific protocols for this type of situation." "No," Robert replied flatly. "I won't risk Victoria's life. If they see any sign of police involvement, I understand your concern, but my team is limited. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Robert stated with a conviction he didn't truly feel. "We will follow their instructions exactly, deliver the money and get Victoria back. After that, they can arrest these bastards." Jonas nodded, respecting his employer's decision, though his gaze revealed his reservations. "In that case, we need to draw up a detailed plan. You will go to the park alone as required, but we'll have teams positioned strategically. We'll use discreet communication. This device," he showed a small earpiece, "will allow us to stay in constant contact without it being noticeable." As they discussed the plan's details, the apartment doorbell rang. Through the security monitor, Robert saw it was Mark Albright. "What's he doing here?" he muttered, surprised and slightly annoyed. The last person he wanted to deal with at that moment was his partner, whose betrayal was still fresh in his mind. "Want me to send him away?" Jonas offered. "No, let him in." "It might be important." Mark entered the apartment with a look of genuine concern. He was carrying a briefcase and seemed tense. "Robert, I just heard. The receptionist mentioned the commotion at the office. Is it true they took Victoria?" "It's true. And we're in the middle of a delicate situation here, Mark. So if you came out of curiosity—" "I didn't come out of curiosity," Mark interrupted, holding out the briefcase. "I came to help. I have contacts, Robert. People who can assist in situations like this, discreetly, without official involvement." "What kind of contacts?" Jonas asked, intrigued. "Ex-intelligence agents, private security consultants specializing in recovery, people who work outside the system, but with an impressive success rate." Robert studied his partner's face, trying to gauge his sincerity. "Why would you do this, Mark?" "After everything—" "Precisely because of everything," Mark replied with unusual honesty. "I've already caused that girl enough harm. I couldn't bear to have this on my conscience too." The revelation surprised Robert. Despite all the hurt and mistrust, there was something genuinely repentant in Mark's demeanor. "And at this critical moment, any help was welcome. All right, talk to your contacts. But understand this, the final decisions are mine. And we are going to do exactly what the kidnappers asked. $1 million in cash, drop off tomorrow at Washington Square Park." "Understood," Mark agreed. "I'll make some calls." As Mark stepped away to use his phone, Jonas approached Robert. "Mr. Miller, about the money. Have you arranged for it?" "Yes, my manager at Chase prepared everything. They're gathering the bills as I requested, used non-sequential. They'll be ready for pickup later today." "Good, and what about the tracker?" "Also arranged. It's microscopic, virtually undetectable, mixed in with the bills." The plan began to take shape. Robert would deliver the money as demanded, but each stack of bills would contain a tiny tracker. Once the exchange was made and Victoria was safe, Jonas's team could locate the kidnappers and ensure their capture. By late afternoon, the plan was meticulously detailed. Robert would go alone to Washington Square Park, following any further instructions provided on site. Jonas's team, reinforced by Mark's contacts, would be strategically positioned, monitoring every move. The ransom in cash was already stored in a plain briefcase, seemingly unremarkable, but equipped with the most advanced trackers available. "Everything's set," Jonas announced, after checking every detail one last time. "Now all we can do is wait and rest. Tomorrow will be a tense day." Robert nodded, though he knew rest was unlikely. How could he sleep while his daughter was in the hands of criminals? "I'm going to check on Michael," he said, heading to his son's room. He found the boy in the same position, sitting on the bed, hugging the toy robot. But now there was something different in his eyes, a determination that replaced the initial shock. "Dad," Michael said as Robert entered, "are we going to get Victoria back?" "We are, son. I promise." "I want to go with you." The statement took Robert by surprise. "Michael, that's very dangerous. You need to stay here safe with Mrs. Carmen. But I saw the men. I recognize them. I can help. The argument was logical, but Robert couldn't even consider putting his son at risk. I understand you want to help, Michael, and your testimony was valuable in identifying the kidnappers. But now I need you to stay here safe. Victoria will need you when she comes back. Michael looked down, clearly disappointed, but accepted his father's decision. Promise she'll come back? I promise, Robert replied with a conviction that came from the depths of his soul. It wasn't just a promise to his son. It was a commitment to himself, to Victoria, to the fate that had so improbably brought them together. That night, as New York City slept under a blanket of twinkling lights, Robert remained awake, watching the night sky through his study window. Somewhere out there his daughter was alone, scared, awaiting rescue, and he would not fail her. Not again. In the abandoned warehouse in Queens, Victoria also watched the sky through a small opening near the ceiling. The stars were just fuzzy dots through the metropolis's smog, but they represented a connection to the world beyond those dirty walls. Her captors had relaxed their guard, confident that a 10-year-old girl posed no threat. Gus was playing cards with Tuck at a makeshift table, while a third man, whom Victoria didn't know, stood guard at the warehouse entrance. The girl had spent the last few hours carefully observing the place, mentally cataloguing every detail, every possible escape route. It wasn't the first time she'd needed to plan an escape. On the streets, she had learned to spot opportunities, to take advantage of moments of distraction. But this time was different. She wasn't alone, relying only on herself. She knew her father was moving heaven and earth to find her. The certainty of that support, of that newly discovered unconditional love, gave her the strength to endure the fear and discomfort. "Hey, Princess, hungry?" Gus asked, approaching with a sandwich wrapped in greasy paper. "We don't want you fainting tomorrow. Your dad needs to see we took good care of you." Victoria accepted the sandwich without comment, watching Gus with cautious eyes. The man smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his cold eyes. "You know, you got lucky. Found your rich daddy, got a princess life, but don't ever forget where you came from. The streets, our world." "I was never part of your world," Victoria replied with a courage that surprised even herself. "I was just lost for a while." Gus's smile vanished, replaced by a dark expression. "Watch that sharp tongue, girl. Your dad hasn't paid yet. If he changes his mind, he won't," Victoria stated with absolute certainty. "He's coming to get me." Something in the girl's conviction seemed to unnerve Gus. Maybe it was her unwavering confidence, or maybe it was the reminder that there were bonds stronger than fear and intimidation. Whatever it was, he walked away, muttering something inaudible. Victoria bit into the sandwich, forcing herself to eat, despite the knot in her stomach. She needed to keep her strength up. Tomorrow would be a decisive day, and she would be ready for any scenario. Thursday morning dawned with a light drizzle over New York, shrouding the skyscrapers in a silvery mist. In Washington Square Park, hurried commuters crossed the park's paths, while street vendors began setting up their stalls. At 9:45 a.m., Robert Miller arrived, wearing a dark suit without a tie and carrying a plain briefcase. He looked like just another executive on his way to work, though his tense face would reveal to any careful observer that this was no ordinary day. "In position," he murmured discreetly, activating the communicator in his ear. "Team in position," Jonas's voice replied. "We have a clear view of the perimeter. No suspicious movement so far." Robert sat on a bench near the center of the park, as instructed in the message he'd received at 8 a.m. The briefcase rested beside him, seemingly neglected, but firmly under his control. At 10 a.m. sharp, his phone vibrated. A new message: "Public restroom north side of the park. Go inside, last stall. Instructions inside. 2 minutes." Robert stood up, gripping the briefcase tightly. "I've received new instructions," he murmured into the communicator. "Public restroom north side." "Received," Jonas replied. "We have eyes on the location. Proceed with caution." The public restroom was a small, dimly lit space that smelled strongly of disinfectant. It was empty, except for a man washing his hands at the sink. Robert headed to the last stall as instructed. Inside, on the toilet paper holder, was a disposable cell phone. As soon as Robert entered, the device rang. "Hello?" "Very good, Mr. Executive. You followed instructions." The voice was the same as the day before, rough, calculating. "Now leave the restroom and go to the taxi stand on the nearby avenue. Take a cab to Grand Central Terminal. You have 10 minutes. Before Robert could reply, the call ended. He put the phone in his pocket and left the restroom. "Change of plans," he reported into the communicator. "Grand Central. I'm taking a cab." "Understood," Jonas replied. "Team is moving. Keep the phone on for tracking." At the taxi stand, Robert got into the first available vehicle, giving the driver the destination. During the ride, he remained alert, watching for any sign of surveillance through the window. Grand Central Terminal, one of New York's most important transportation hubs, was as busy as ever. Hundreds of people moved through the historic main concourse, creating the perfect setting for the kidnappers. A large crowd, many escape routes difficult to monitor. As soon as he got out of the cab, the phone in his pocket rang again. "I'm at the station," Robert reported. "Good. Go to track 5. There's a man wearing a red cap and a denim jacket. Give him the briefcase. Your daughter is in the abandoned warehouse of the old Santana textile factory in Queens. The exact address is on the phone you received. As soon as we confirm the money, she'll be released. If you try any tricks, I won't try anything. I just want my daughter back. Then we have an understanding." Robert walked toward track 5, his heart pounding. The man in the red cap was there, pretending to wait for a train. His sharp, nervous eyes constantly scanned the area. "Jonas," Robert murmured into the communicator, "I'm making the drop now. The address where Victoria is being held is on the phone I received. I've sent it to your number via text. As soon as I make the drop, head over there." "Received. Team 2 is already en route to the address. Team 1 will stay with you." Robert approached the man, who immediately recognized him. "The briefcase," he said, holding out his hand. "My daughter," Robert replied, holding the case firmly. "As soon as we confirm the cash, she's released. Take it or leave it, executive." Reluctantly, Robert handed over the briefcase. The man took it and walked away quickly, blending into the crowd. A discreet team from Jonas's crew would follow him, tracking the money thanks to the hidden devices. Meanwhile, at the abandoned warehouse, Victoria noticed a change in activity. Gus was talking nervously on the phone, while Tuck hastily packed a backpack. "It's confirmed," Gus announced, hanging up the phone. "The money's on its way." "And the girl?" asked the third man, whom Victoria had learned was named Benny. "When Raphael confirms the money's real, we let her go." Victoria felt a shiver of hope run down her spine. Her father had done his part. Soon she would be free. But something in Gus's behavior put her on high alert. The man seemed too restless, exchanging meaningful glances with Tuck. Something else was happening here. "What if her dad called the cops?" Benny questioned, voicing the concern they all shared. "That's why we're not waiting," Gus replied, checking a gun tucked into his waistband. "As soon as the money is confirmed, we take our payment and disappear. The girl stays." Victoria's heart raced. They didn't intend to release her as promised. It was a betrayal, a trap. Without a second thought, the girl took advantage of a moment of distraction and ran for the only window in the warehouse she had identified as a possible escape route. It was high, but next to it was a pile of boxes she could use as a makeshift ladder. "Hey!" Tuck shouted, the first to notice her escape. "Get her!" Victoria scrambled up the boxes with the agility of someone fighting for her life. Her small fingers gripped the windowsill as her feet pushed her upward in a desperate struggle for freedom. Just as Gus reached her, she managed to squeeze through the opening, slipping to the outside of the warehouse. The fall wasn't very high, but it was still painful. Victoria felt a sharp impact in her ankle as she hit the ground, but there was no time for pain. She got up and ran, limping toward the street. Behind her she heard shouts and the sound of heavy footsteps. Her pursuers wouldn't let her escape easily. On the street, Victoria ran as fast as her injured ankle would allow. She didn't know this part of the city, but that had never stopped her before. Years on the streets had taught her the art of disappearing, of finding alleys and passages, of blending in with passers-by. However, the physical disadvantage was significant. Gus and Tuck were adults, with longer legs and superior strength. The distance between them was closing fast. When Victoria turned a corner and realized she had run into a dead-end alley, despair threatened to overwhelm her. But instead of panicking, the girl quickly assessed her options. There was a stack of boxes piled against a wall, a fire escape a few feet up, and several dumpsters that could serve as a temporary hiding place. She chose the dumpster, knowing she wouldn't have time to reach the fire escape before her pursuers caught her. She huddled among trash bags, covering herself as best she could, and waited, her heart beating so loudly she feared the sound would give her away. Gus and Tuck entered the alley seconds later, panting and furious. "Where is she?" Gus growled. "She couldn't have gone far. Must have hidden," Tuck replied, approaching the dumpster where Victoria was hiding. The girl held her breath, squeezing her eyes shut as if that could make her invisible. She heard Tuck's footsteps approaching, the lid of the dumpster being lifted. Just then a deafening noise erupted at the alley's entrance. Cars screeching to a halt, voices shouting commands, the unmistakable sound of several people running toward them. "Freeze! Security! Hands up!" Victoria recognized the voice of Jonas, the security guard her father had hired. A sound had never seemed so sweet. "Damn it!" Gus shouted, immediately abandoning the search and trying to run in the opposite direction. But the alley was a dead end, and the rescue team was already blocking the only entrance. "Victoria." It was her father's voice, desperate and hopeful. "Victoria, where are you?" "As here," she cried, emerging from her hiding place, tears of relief streaming down her dirty face. "Dad, I'm here!" Robert ran to her, completely ignoring the kidnappers who were being subdued by the security team. He knelt and hugged his daughter tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again if he let go. "Are you okay?" "Did they hurt you?" he asked, examining her anxiously. "I'm okay. I twisted my ankle running away, but I'm okay." Robert lifted her into his arms, carrying her out of the alley, away from the scene of violence and fear. "How did you find me?" "They said they would only release me after confirming the money. I never trusted them," Robert replied. "While I was making the money drop at the station, the other team was already on their way here. And when they arrived, they saw you running." Victoria rested her head on her father's shoulder, finally allowing herself to relax. "I knew you would come," she murmured, exhausted. "I knew you wouldn't leave me." "Never again," Robert promised with absolute conviction. "No one will ever separate you from me again. That's a promise." In the car taking them back home, Victoria fell asleep, overcome by physical and emotional exhaustion. Robert watched her, still barely believing it had all ended well. It could so easily have been a tragedy. The money was recovered, Jonas reported, who was accompanying them. All three are in custody, waiting for the police. They'll be charged with kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment. They won't see the light of day for a long time. Thank you, Jonas, for everything. It's my job, sir, but there's something we need to discuss. Your security. After this incident, your current residence may no longer be suitable. The kidnappers know the address, they know your routine. Robert nodded, understanding the implication. You're suggesting we move? It would be the most prudent course. A house in a gated community, with reinforced security. Far from here, ideally. The idea of leaving the apartment where he had lived with Claire, where Michael had grown up, caused a pang in Robert's chest. But his children's safety came first. And perhaps, he reflected, it was time for a complete new start. A new home for his newly formed family. "I'll arrange it," he decided, looking at Victoria asleep in his arms. "A new beginning for all of us." When they arrived at the apartment, Michael was waiting anxiously at the door with Mrs. Carmen by his side. Upon seeing Victoria in his father's arms, the boy ran to them, tears of relief streaming down his face. "Victoria," he exclaimed, hugging his sister as soon as Robert placed her on the sofa. "You're back." The girl smiled, still sleepy but visibly happy to be home. "I told you I'd be back," she replied, with a conviction that moved everyone present. "We're family now." Michael nodded vigorously, not letting go of his sister's hand as if afraid she might disappear again. Robert watched the scene with a full heart. In the midst of so much chaos and pain, he had found what truly mattered, his children together safe, building bonds that no adversity could break. Life rarely followed predictable scripts. Sometimes it was precisely the most improbable events that revealed the most meaningful paths. And there in that living room, with his two children embracing on the sofa, Robert Miller understood that fate, with all its unpredictability, sometimes offered priceless second chances. "Dad," Michael called, his voice suddenly serious, "can we get a dog now?" The unexpected question broke the tension of the moment, drawing laughter from everyone. Even Mrs. Carmen, always so composed, couldn't suppress a smile. "You know what?" Robert replied, sitting beside his children. "I think it's time we got a dog. In fact, it's time for a lot of changes around here." "What kind of changes?" Victoria asked, curious. "Good changes," Robert assured them, smiling at both. "A new home, more space, more security. A place where we can truly be the family we're meant to be." And as the children excitedly began to plan what this new home would be like, Robert exchanged a meaningful look with Jonas. His family's safety would now be his top priority. He would never again let danger get so close. That night, after the most joyful dinner the apartment had witnessed in years, Robert tucked both children into Michael's room. Victoria, still shaken by the traumatic experience, didn't want to sleep alone, and Michael was more than willing to share his space. "Tomorrow will be a new day," Robert said, kissing each of them on the forehead. "The first of many in our new life." "Dad," Victoria called out as he was heading to the door, "thank you for finding me." The simplicity of the sentence held layers of meaning that did not escape Robert. She wasn't just referring to the physical rescue that day, but to the entire journey that had led them to find each other, the acknowledgement, the acceptance, the unconditional love that transcended the circumstances of birth or external interference. "I will always find you, Victoria," he promised. Always. And with that promise, which was both an assurance and a declaration of love, Robert left his children to fall asleep, united by bonds that no adversity could ever break again. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. 6 months had passed since Victoria's rescue. Autumn colored New York with golden hues, bringing changes that mirrored the transformations in the Miller family's life. After the kidnapping, Robert had found a spacious house in Westchester County, a luxury gated community known for its strict security. The property, with a large garden and a swimming pool, offered the space the children needed, far from the environment that now brought back memories of the trauma they had endured. On that Saturday morning, Robert watched Michael and Victoria playing in the garden with Thor, the golden retriever who had become an essential part of the family. Michael threw a ball that the dog enthusiastically chased, while Victoria sat under an apple tree reading a book. "Coffee, sir," offered Mrs. Carmen, who had also moved with them, refusing to abandon her children. "Thank you, Carmen. Have the kids had breakfast?" "Yes, sir. Pancakes with jam, as they asked." And Mr. Albright called, confirming he'll be here at 10 for the meeting. Mark was coming to discuss a project that occupied a large part of Robert's thoughts, the New Paths Foundation, an institution dedicated to sheltering homeless children, especially those with communication difficulties. Promptly at 10, Mark arrived with a folder under his arm and an animated expression. "Good morning, Robert. Kids, how are you?" Michael and Victoria replied politely. The relationship between Victoria and Mark had improved significantly since his confession. The girl's capacity for forgiveness impressed everyone. "I brought the finalized documents," Mark announced, opening the folder. "The New Paths Foundation is officially registered, with all the necessary permits." Robert examined the papers with satisfaction. "When can we start operations?" "In 2 weeks. The official opening can be at the end of the month." Victoria approached the table. "Can I go when it opens?" "I want to meet the kids." "Of course," Robert replied. "Actually, I was thinking you could have an important role there. No one understands what these children have faced better than you." Victoria's face lit up. "I want to. Can I tell them my story? Show them that you can have a family even when you think you won't anymore?" "That would be wonderful, my daughter." Michael also spoke up. "I can help too. I can teach them how to start talking again when you've been silent for a long time." Robert hugged them both, deeply touched by his children's generosity. After Mark left, Victoria made a request. "Dad, can we visit my mom's grave today? It's been a while since we've been." "Of course we can. I'll pick up some flowers on the way." At Greenwood Cemetery, the family stood before the simple but well-tended grave of Renee Silva. Victoria placed a bouquet of white lilies, her mother's favorite flowers. "Hi, Mom," she said in a low voice. "I brought my family today. You already know Dad and Michael. We're doing well. I'm in a new school, got a good grade in math. And we're going to open a place to help kids like I used to be." Michael added, "Thank you for taking care of Victoria before. She helped me when I couldn't talk." And now Dad isn't sad all the time anymore. Robert, a few steps behind, placed a hand on each child's shoulder. Thank you for giving our daughter enough strength to survive until we could find each other again. I promise I will care for her with all the love she deserves. As they were leaving, Victoria surprised everyone. Dad, can we also visit the place where Michael's mom is? The question caught Robert off guard. Do you want to do that, Michael? The boy nodded. I think Mom would like to know that we're a bigger family now. At Kensico Cemetery, they found Aunt Audrey by the imposing Palmer family mausoleum. The woman, who hadn't visited Robert's home since Victoria's arrival, looked older and tired. Robert, Michael, and Victoria, she greeted, including the girl for the first time. Aunt Audrey, Robert replied politely, we didn't expect to see you. I come every Saturday to talk to Claire, she explained, avoiding Robert's gaze. And what do you tell her? Michael asked, stepping closer. Audrey seemed surprised to hear Michael speak. Michael, you're talking. Ever since Victoria arrived, he confirmed, smiling. Audrey's eyes turned to Victoria, assessing her with a look different from her initial disdain. I tell Claire about my life, and lately, I've been talking about you all too. About us? About how Michael is talking again. About how... Perhaps I was hasty in my judgments. It was almost an apology. Victoria, showing her extraordinary capacity for empathy, approached Audrey and extended her hand, a simple gesture of reconciliation. After a moment's hesitation, Audrey accepted the offered hand. I brought something for you, she said, indicating a bag beside the tomb. Books that belong to my daughter, Beatrice. I thought you might like them. Victoria accepted the gift with a shy smile, understanding the profound meaning of the gesture. Thank you. I'll take good care of them. As they said their goodbyes, Audrey surprised them all. Next Sunday, I'm having lunch at my house. Nothing formal, just family. You, all of you, would be welcome. The invitation, explicitly extended to include Victoria, represented a significant change. Robert exchanged a look with his children, who nodded. We appreciate the invitation, Aunt Audrey. We'll be there. The following Friday, the New Paths Foundation was inaugurated in a ceremony that brought together officials, the press, and the first children to be served. In his speech, Robert spoke about second chances, improbable encounters that transform lives, and the importance of extending a hand to those in need. When he finished, he called Victoria to the stage. My name is Victoria, she began, looking directly at the children. Until a few months ago, I was on the streets, like many of you. I didn't have a family, I didn't have hope. Her voice gained strength, but something happened. I found my father and my brother, and I discovered that life can change completely. Here you will have the same chance, to learn, grow, and dream, and most importantly, to never be alone again. A boy of about 8 shyly raised his hand. Do you think I can find a family too? Victoria knelt to be at his level. You already have. Everyone here is your family now, and together we will find even more people to love you. The boy hugged her and, to everyone's surprise, uttered his first word after months of silence, what thanks. In the following months, the foundation grew rapidly. The initial number of 10 children expanded to 50 before the end of the first year. Some were adopted, while others remained under the institution's care, receiving a quality education. Michael became a regular presence, sharing techniques that had helped him overcome his own silence. Robert, without leaving the construction company, dedicated more time to his family and the social project. One Sunday, almost a year after the encounter that changed everything, the family gathered for an intimate celebration. What are we celebrating? Michael asked. The anniversary of a meeting, Robert replied, pouring juice into elegant glasses. It's been exactly 1 year since Victoria approached us with the promise that changed our lives. I remember, Victoria smiled. I said I would make Michael talk in exchange for your leftovers. And you kept your promise, Robert completed. But you gave us so much more. You gave us a complete family again. Michael raised his glass. A toast to Victoria, the best sister in the world. Later, as the children were getting ready for bed, Robert found Victoria organizing her books. I was thinking, he began, sitting on the edge of the bed. You've been with us for almost a year, and we've never had a birthday party for you. My birthday is still 3 months away, Victoria replied, confused. I'm talking about our family's birthday, the day we became whole again. Victoria hugged her father impulsively. You know, sometimes I'm still afraid I'll wake up and find out it was all a dream. That I'll be back on that piece of cardboard under the overpass. Robert held her tightly against his chest. It's not a dream, Victoria. And even if it were, we would never wake up. Because this is our reality now. You, me, Michael. The family forever. Thank you for finding me, she said, repeating the words that had become almost a mantra between them. I will always find you, Robert replied. That night, as silence enveloped the house in Westchester, 3 hearts beat in sync. 3 lives that, through improbable paths, had found one another. The boy who couldn't speak, now fluent in love and hope. The girl from the streets, anchored in safety and belonging. The father, once paralyzed by grief, reborn through purpose. The promise made on a Fifth Avenue sidewalk was fulfilled in unexpected ways. I'll make your son talk in exchange for your leftovers, had transformed into unbreakable bonds, deep healing and new beginnings for dozens of other children who, like Victoria, just needed a chance. The journey would continue, with its own challenges, but now they walked together, strengthened by the love they had built, by the family they had chosen to be. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, Michael, and Victoria has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about life-changing encounters. Find it here by clicking to your left. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the video. We bring you unique stories that explore the complexities of life every day. We want to read your comments about what touched you most in this story of redemption and second chances. Until our next narrative journey,